Commander Zixathera sat in the dark corner of the space station bar, her forearms wrapped around a hot drink as steam rose from the cup. The old alien warrior looked tired. Her blue skin had scars from many battles. Her eyes glowed soft yellow. In the dim light, 3 young alien soldiers sat across from her. They were new recruits from her home planet. Their skin patches blinked with excitement. They had heard stories about the old commander. Tonight she had agreed to tell them about the war with humans. "You want to know about humans?" Zixathera asked. Her voice was deep and rough. "You think you are ready to hear what I saw?" The young soldiers nodded quickly. They leaned forward in their seats. One of them spoke up. "Commander, we heard you fought them in the Kepler system. Is it true they are small and weak?" Zixathera laughed. It was not a happy sound. "Small? Yes? Weak?" She shook her head. "That is what we thought too. That mistake cost us many lives." She took a long drink from her cup. The warm liquid seemed to help her remember. "I was young then, just like you. I worked on the great warship Eternal Dominion. We had 3,000 soldiers on that ship. It was the pride of our fleet." The recruits listened with wide eyes. They had never seen such a big ship. Our leaders told us humans were new to space travel. They said humans were primitive. They said one of our ships could beat 10 human ships, easily. Zixathera's voice got quiet. They were wrong about everything. She stared into her drink for a moment. Then she continued. "We were patrolling near a small human colony. Our sensors picked up a human ship. Just one ship. It was tiny compared to ours, maybe 100 meters long. Our ship was over 2,000 meters. One of the young soldiers interrupted. "Just one ship? Did they run away?" "That is what we expected," Zixathera said. "Captain Veltok sent them a message. He told them to surrender or be destroyed. We thought they would give up right away." She paused and took another drink. "Instead, we got a message back. It was from their captain, a human named Jake Morrison. He was sitting in his command chair looking calm. Too calm." The recruits waited for her to continue. The bar around them was quiet. Other aliens were listening to the story too. Morrison looked at our captain through the video link. He smiled. It was not a nice smile. Then he said something that made our whole crew go silent. Zixathera's voice got even quieter. He said, "Let me understand this right. You have 3,000 soldiers on your ship. I have 12 people on mine. Those odds seem about fair for a good fight." The young soldiers looked confused. "Fair? 12 against 3,000? "That is what we thought too," Zixathera said. "We thought he was crazy." Captain Veltok laughed. He ordered all weapons to target the human ship. He wanted to capture it, not destroy it. He thought it would be easy. She set down her cup and looked at each of the recruits. "What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about war. The human ship did not try to run away. It did not try to hide. Instead, it turned toward the massive alien warship and started moving forward. Fast. Morrison's ship came straight at us," Zixathera continued. "All their weapons were firing, small weapons, nothing that could hurt our big ship. We thought they were just being brave before they died." The old commander's eyes got a faraway look. "But then our sensors picked up something strange. The human ship's power core was getting hotter. Much hotter than it should be." One of the recruits asked, "What were they doing?" "They were overloading their reactor," Zixathera said. "They were turning their entire ship into a bomb aimed right at us." The young aliens gasped. "They were going to kill themselves." Morrison came on the communication system one more time. He was still smiling. Behind him, his crew was working calmly at their stations. No panic, no fear. He said, "Tell your families you died fighting humans. Tell them we don't surrender." Zixathera remembered the moment clearly. The human ship was getting closer. Their reactor was about to explode. Captain Veltok finally understood what was happening. He screamed orders to his crew. We tried to shoot down their ship before it reached us. Our big guns fired everything. We hit them many times. Parts of their ship were breaking off. Fire was everywhere. But they kept coming. The bar was completely quiet now. Everyone was listening to the story. The human ship was falling apart, but Morrison was still talking to us. Blood was running down his face, his crew was dying around him. But he kept talking. He said, "This is what happens when you threaten human colonies. We don't forget. We don't forgive." Zixthera took a deep breath. At the last second, Captain Veltok ordered our ship to move. We barely got out of the way. The human ship exploded right where we had been. The blast was so bright it blinded our sensors for several minutes. She looked at the shocked faces of the young soldiers. When our vision cleared, we looked for survivors. There were none. 12 humans had just attacked a ship with 3,000 aliens. They knew they would die. They did it anyway. One of the recruits asked, "Why? Why would they do that?" "That is what we asked too," Zixthera said. Later, we learned that Morrison had sent a message to Human Command before he died. He told them about our ship. He gave them our location and our weapons. He made sure other humans would know how to fight us. The old commander finished her drink. 3 days later, 20 human ships found us. They were small ships just like Morrison's. But there were 20 of them, and they all had the same look in their eyes that Morrison had. She stood up slowly. Her old bones creaked. That battle lasted 6 hours. We lost. A ship with 3,000 soldiers lost to ships with maybe 300 humans total. The young aliens could not believe what they were hearing. How is that possible? Because humans do not fight like us, Zixthera explained. We fight to win. They fight to win or die trying. There is a difference, a big difference. She looked at each of the recruits one more time. Morrison and his crew became heroes to other humans. They sing songs about them. They tell stories about them to their children. That one small ship started a war that lasted 5 years. The commander started to walk away, then stopped. You want to know the most frightening part? After we studied human history, we learned that what Morrison did was not unusual. Humans have been doing things like that for thousands of years. They call it sacrifice, they call it honor, they call it duty. She turned back to the young soldiers. Tomorrow I will tell you about the siege of Procyon Station. That is when I learned that human bravery is not just about dying. Sometimes it is about living when dying would be easier. The recruits sat in silence as the old commander walked away. They had come to hear exciting war stories. Instead, they had learned something that would give them nightmares. They had learned that humans were not just another alien species to fight. They were something much more dangerous. The bar slowly came back to life as other aliens started talking again, but the 3 young soldiers just sat there thinking about 12 humans who had attacked 3,000 aliens without fear. They were beginning to understand why the war with humans had been so terrible, and why it had ended the way it did. Outside the station, stars twinkled in the darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars, humans were building new ships and training new soldiers. The war was over, but the memory of it would last forever. Commander Zixthera knew there were more stories to tell. Stories that would help these young soldiers understand what they might face if they ever met humans in battle. Stories that might save their lives. The next evening, the 3 young alien soldiers returned to the bar. They had barely slept. Commander Zixthera's story about the human Captain Morrison kept playing in their minds. They found the old commander sitting in the same dark corner. "You came back," Zixthera said. She did not sound surprised. "Good. There is more you need to know about humans. Much more." The recruits sat down quickly. Their skin patches were glowing brighter tonight. They were nervous, but excited. One of them spoke up. "Commander, what happened after Morrison's ship exploded?" Zixthera ordered another hot drink. "That explosion was just the beginning. The real horror came later, at a place called Procyon Station." She waited for her drink to arrive. The young soldiers fidgeted in their seats. Other aliens in the bar were already listening. Word had spread about the commander's stories. Procyon Station was a human supply base, Zixthera began. It was built on a small moon, not very big, not very important, but it sat on a major shipping route. If we could take it, we could cut off supplies to 3 human colonies. The old commander's voice got serious. Our fleet command decided to take the station. They sent 5,000 of our best soldiers. I was a squad leader then. We thought it would be easy. She took a sip of her drink. The humans had only 200 Marines defending the station. 200 against 5,000. The math was simple. We would win in a few days. One of the recruits asked, "Did you win quickly?" Zixathara laughed bitterly. The siege lasted 127 days. 127 days of hell. The young aliens looked confused. How could 200 humans hold out against 5,000 aliens for so long? The human commander was Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Blake. He was a big man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. When we demanded surrender, he sent back a simple message: "Come and take it." Zixathara remembered that first day clearly. We attacked with everything we had: plasma cannons, heavy armor, air support. We thought we would break through their defenses in hours. She shook her head. The humans had built their defenses well. Every corridor was a trap. Every room was a fortress. They made us fight for every meter. But that was not the worst part. The recruits leaned forward. What was the worst part? The humans would not give up. Ever. When we destroyed one of their gun positions, they would rebuild it overnight. When we killed their soldiers, others would take their places. They fought like machines that never got tired. Zixathara's eyes got that faraway look again. After 2 weeks, we had taken half the station. Our commanders were happy. They thought victory was close, but then our supply ships stopped coming. She explained how human ships had started attacking their supply lines. Small, fast ships that would hit and run. The alien forces on the station started running low on food and ammunition, but the humans were running low on supplies too. We thought they would surrender when their food ran out. We were wrong again. The old commander paused. What she was about to say would shock the young soldiers. The humans started eating their dead. The recruits gasped. Several other aliens in the bar turned to stare. Eating the dead was unthinkable to most alien races. "You think I am lying?" Zixathara asked. I wish I was. But I saw it with my own eyes. When a human soldier died, his friends would take the body. They would process the meat. They would cook it and eat it. One of the young soldiers looked sick. "That is horrible." "Yes, it is," Zixathara agreed. "But it kept them alive. And they kept fighting. Even when they were eating their own dead, they never stopped fighting." She continued her story. There was a human medic named Major Lisa Hayes. She ran the station's medical center. When they ran out of medicine, she started operating on wounded soldiers with no painkillers. The commander described how Hayes would use pieces of metal as surgical tools, how she would hold down screaming patients while she cut bullets out of their bodies, how she never stopped trying to save lives. Hayes would work for 18 hours straight, then sleep for 2 hours, then work 18 more hours. She did this. For weeks, her hands were always covered in blood, but she kept saving human lives. Zixathara took another drink. After a month, we started to notice something strange. Our soldiers were afraid to attack certain parts of the station. The recruits asked why. Because the humans had become something terrifying. They were thin from hunger. Their clothes were torn and bloody. They looked like walking skeletons, but they still fought like demons. She described how human soldiers would charge alien positions with no fear of death. How they would fight hand to hand even when badly wounded. How they would use their own bodies as shields to protect their friends. Our soldiers started having nightmares. They would wake up screaming about the thin human soldiers with empty eyes who would not die. Some of my troops refused orders to attack. They said it was like fighting ghosts. The siege dragged on. Both sides were suffering, but the humans seemed to suffer without breaking. After 3 months, Colonel Blake was badly wounded in a bombing attack. Shrapnel had torn up his chest and legs. He could barely walk. Our commanders thought he would finally surrender. Zixathara smiled grimly. Instead, Blake did something that still gives me chills. He used the station's main communication system to send a message to human command. He knew we would track the signal. He knew we would bomb the communication center, but he sent the message anyway. The old commander explained what Blake had done. He had given human reinforcements detailed information about alien positions, weapons, and weaknesses. He had provided intelligence that would help humans win the battle. Blake knew that sending that message would get him killed. The communication center was in the most dangerous part of the station. But he went there himself. He sent the message personally. She paused. 10 minutes after he finished transmitting, our artillery destroyed the communication center. Blake died in that attack. But his message had already reached human command. The young soldiers were quiet. They were beginning to understand what made humans so dangerous. 2 days later, human reinforcements arrived. 20 ships full of angry, human Marines who had heard Blake's message. They attacked us with a fury I had never seen before. Zixthera described the final battle, how the humans had used Blake's intelligence to hit alien positions with perfect accuracy, how they had fought their way through the station to rescue the surviving defenders. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, most of my unit was dead or wounded. The humans had won. 200 humans had held out against 5,000 aliens for over 4 months. She looked at the shocked faces of the recruits. You want to know the most frightening part? When the rescue ships arrived, only 43 of the original 200 defenders were still alive. 43 humans had kept fighting until the end. One of the young soldiers asked, "What happened to Major Hayes?" She survived. When the rescue teams found her, she was still operating on wounded soldiers. She had been awake for 36 hours straight. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion, but she was still trying to save lives. Zixthera finished her drink. After the battle, Human Command promoted Blake to full colonel. They named the station after him. Every human soldier learns his story in training. She stood up slowly. Hayes received their highest medal for medical service. She went on to train other human medics. She taught them how to keep fighting even when everything seems hopeless. The old commander looked at the young aliens. That siege taught me something important about humans. They do not just fight with weapons. They fight with their will. They fight with their refusal to give up. That makes them more dangerous than any alien race I have ever encountered. She started to walk away, then turned back. Tomorrow I will tell you about Lieutenant Susan Clark. That is when I learned that humans can be even more frightening when they are captured. The recruits sat in silence as their commander left. They had learned another terrible lesson about human warfare. Humans would rather eat their own dead than surrender. Outside the station, the stars looked different now. Each point of light might hide a human world. Each world might contain millions of humans who would fight like Blake and Hayes if threatened. The young soldiers were starting to understand why the war had ended in peace talks rather than alien victory. On the third night, Commander Zixthera found the young soldiers waiting for her. They had arrived early and saved her usual seat. The bar was more crowded tonight. Word about the commander's stories had spread throughout the station. "You look worried," Zixthera said as she sat down. "Good. You should be worried. Tonight's story is different from the others." The three recruits exchanged glances. They had spent the day talking about Colonel Blake and Major Hayes. The idea of humans eating their own dead to survive had haunted their dreams. The first 2 stories were about humans dying with honor. The old commander continued. "Tonight, I will tell you about something worse. I will tell you about a human who refused to break." She ordered her drink and waited. The young soldiers could see other aliens leaning closer to listen. Everyone wanted to hear what came next. Her name was Lieutenant Susan Clark. She was captured during the battle for Kepler 186F. It was a mining world with valuable minerals. Both sides wanted to control it. Zixthera remembered that planet well. It had been a hard fight. The humans had defended every mine, every building, every road. They had made the aliens pay for every piece of ground. Clark was leading a squad of human soldiers in an attack on our main base. The attack failed. Most of her squad died. She was wounded and unconscious when we found her. The commander described how they had brought Clark to their prisoner facility. She was a small woman with brown hair and green eyes. She looked harmless. The alien guards thought she would be an easy prisoner to handle. The facility commander was Colonel Thexvara. He was known for being clever with prisoners. He thought he could break any human spirit with the right pressure. Zixthara took a sip of her drink. Texvara decided to use psychological torture on Clark. He thought it would be more effective than physical pain. The recruits asked what psychological torture meant. It means attacking the mind instead of the body, Zixthara explained. Texvara showed Clark fake videos of her home planet being destroyed. He showed her fake footage of her family being killed. He told her lies about how the war was going. The old commander's voice got quieter. For most prisoners, this would work. They would become sad and hopeless. They would tell us everything we wanted to know. She paused. Clark did something different, something that terrified everyone in the facility. The young soldiers waited. The bar had gone completely quiet. She started laughing. The recruits looked confused. Laughing? Not normal laughing, Zixthara said. It was a cold, scary laugh. She would laugh at the fake videos. She would laugh at Texvara's threats. She would laugh at everything. The commander described how Clark's laughter had echoed through the prison facility, how it had made the guards nervous, how it had continued for hours at a time. On the second day, Texvara tried harder. He brought in actors dressed as human soldiers. They pretended to be tortured in front of Clark. He thought this would make her talk. Zixthara shook her head. Clark laughed harder. She told the actors they were doing a bad job. She gave them tips on how to scream more realistically. She treated the whole thing like a joke. The recruits were starting to understand. This human was not breaking. She was doing something else entirely. By the third day, something strange started happening in the facility. The power systems began failing. Lights would flicker on and off. Computers would crash. The guards thought it was just old equipment. The old commander's eyes got that distant look. But I was suspicious. I decided to watch Clark more carefully. What I saw made my blood run cold. She explained how she had used hidden cameras to observe Clark's cell. The human woman appeared to be eating her meals normally, but she was doing something else with the metal eating utensils. Clark was using her fork and spoon to slowly damage the electrical systems in her cell. She would stick them into the power outlets during the night. She was causing short circuits on purpose. The young soldiers gasped. That was incredibly dangerous. The electrical systems could have killed her. But Clark was being very careful. She had somehow figured out exactly how much damage to cause. She was making the facility's power grid unstable without getting herself killed. Zixthara continued the story. During the day, she would laugh and joke with the guards. She would act like a crazy person. But at night, she was working like an engineer. She was sabotaging the entire facility. The commander described how Clark had studied the facility's layout during her interrogations, how she had memorized the locations of important systems, how she had planned her escape while pretending to be mentally broken. On the night before a planned prisoner exchange, the facility lost all power. Emergency lighting kicked in, but most of the security systems were down. That was when Clark made her move. The recruits were on the edge of their seats, and what did she do? She had created a small explosive device using cleaning chemicals from her cell and electronics she had stolen. She used it to blow open her cell door. Zixthara's voice got even quieter. But Clark did not try to escape the facility. She did. Something much worse. The young soldiers waited with wide eyes. She went hunting. The old commander explained how Clark had moved through the darkened facility like a ghost, how she had used her knowledge of the building's layout to avoid most of the guards, how she had found the guards who had been involved in her torture. Clark took their weapons and used them. She was trained in alien weapons systems. She knew exactly how to use our own guns against us. The recruits asked how many guards she had killed. 7. She killed 7 guards that night. All of them had been part of her interrogation team. She hunted them down one by one in the darkness. Zixthara described how Clark had been methodical and precise, how she had not killed any guards who had treated her decently, how she had only targeted those who had tortured her. The most frightening part was how calm she was. When reinforcements arrived, they found Clark sitting in the facility's command center. She was uploading all of our intelligence files to human forces. The commander took a long drink. Clark had hacked into our computer systems. She was sending our secret information to her own people, battle plans, troop movements, weapon specifications, everything. The young soldiers could barely believe what they were hearing. One human prisoner had destroyed an entire intelligence facility. When our soldiers surrounded her, Clark raised her hands in surrender. She was still smiling that cold smile. She said, "I am ready for the prisoner exchange now." Zixthara looked at each of the recruits. The exchange went ahead as planned. Clark walked calmly to the human transport ship. She turned back once and waved goodbye to Thexavara. The old commander's voice got grim. 3 days later, human forces attacked all of our positions on Kepler 186F. They knew exactly where we were. They knew our weaknesses. They knew everything. She explained how the humans had used Clark's intelligence to win a complete victory. How they had captured the entire planet in less than a week. How they had done it with minimal casualties. Clark had given them everything they needed to destroy us. And she had done it while pretending to be a broken prisoner. One of the recruits asked what happened to Clark after the exchange. She returned to duty. She was promoted to captain. She received a medal for intelligence gathering under extreme conditions. Zixthara stood up slowly. But that is not the end of the story. After the war ended, I met Clark again at a peace conference. She was working as a diplomatic security officer. The commander paused. I asked her why she had laughed during her imprisonment. She told me something I will never forget. The young soldiers waited. Clark said, "I was laughing because you showed me fake videos of my family dying. But I know my family. My father is a retired Marine. My mother is a combat medic. My brother is a special forces operator. If you had really attacked my home, my family would have killed half your invasion force before breakfast." Zixthara looked around the quiet bar. That is when I understood something important about human psychology. They do not break under pressure, they get angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. She started to walk away, then turned back one more time. Tomorrow I will tell you about the human they call Deathwalker. That is when I learned that some humans are so dangerous they fight wars all by themselves. The recruits sat in stunned silence as their commander left. They had learned another terrifying lesson about humans. Even when captured and tortured, humans could still be deadly. Outside the station, the stars seemed to twinkle with menace. Each one might hide a human like Susan Clark, a human who would smile while planning your destruction. The young soldiers were beginning to understand why their people had agreed to peace with the humans. Fighting such creatures was not just dangerous, it was madness. The fourth night brought even more aliens to the bar. Word had spread through the entire station about Commander Zixthara's stories. Military officers, traders, and civilians all wanted to hear about the war with humans. The young recruits had to fight for seats near their commander. Tonight will be different, Zixthara said as she looked around the crowded room. The other stories were about humans in groups. Tonight I will tell you about one human who fought alone. She waited for quiet. Even the bartender had stopped working to listen. His name was Sergeant First Class Danny Rodriguez. The other humans called him many things, Ghost, Shadow, but we aliens had a different name for him. The commander paused for effect. We called him Deathwalker. A shiver went through the crowd. Even aliens who had never fought humans had heard whispers of that name. Rodriguez was what humans call a special operations soldier. He was trained to work alone behind enemy lines. His job was to cause chaos and fear. Zixthara ordered her, "Drink," and began the tale. I first heard about Rodriguez when our supply convoy started disappearing. Not destroyed, not captured. They simply vanished without a trace. The young recruits leaned forward. This sounded impossible. A convoy of 20 vehicles would leave our main base. They would drive down a road we had used safely for months. Somewhere along the way, they would just stop existing. The old commander described how search teams would find the road empty. No wreckage, no bodies, no signs of battle. The vehicles and their crews had simply vanished like smoke. At first, our commanders thought it was equipment failure. Maybe the vehicles had fallen into hidden caves or gotten lost in the wilderness. She shook her head. But it kept happening. Every few days, another convoy would disappear. Always on different roads, always in different areas. Our supply lines were slowly being strangled. The recruits asked how one human could make entire convoys disappear. That is what we wanted to know. Command assigned my unit to hunt down whatever was causing the disappearances. We had 200 of our best soldiers. We had air support, we had every sensor we could carry. Zixthara took a sip of her drink. We spent 3 months searching for Rodriguez. 3 months of chasing shadows and finding nothing. The commander described their hunt, how they would find signs that someone had been in an area. Footprints that looked human. Camps that had been used recently. But Rodriguez himself was always gone. The worst part was the evidence we did find. Small piles of what looked like salt. White crystals scattered around the places where convoys had vanished. She looked at the confused faces in the crowd. We had our scientists study the salt. What they found terrified our entire command staff. The young soldiers waited. It was not salt. It was the dried remains of Velthrian soldiers. Rodriguez had found a way to remove all the water from alien bodies. He was turning our people into dust. Gasps echoed through the bar. Several aliens looked sick. The idea of being turned into powder was horrifying to any living creature. Rodriguez had somehow learned about alien biology. He had created chemical weapons that were harmless to humans but deadly to us. He could kill entire convoy crews without firing a shot. Zixthara explained how Rodriguez would attack supply convoys at night, how he would use chemical sprays to kill the drivers and guards, how he would then hide the vehicles in caves or underwater. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was how he studied us. The commander's voice got quieter. We found cameras hidden along our supply routes, tiny human recording devices that had been watching us for months. Rodriguez knew our schedules. He knew our patrol patterns. He knew everything about how we moved supplies. The recruits asked how one human could set up so many cameras without being caught. Because Rodriguez was not fighting like a normal soldier. He was fighting like a scientist. He would spend weeks studying a single road. He would learn when we used it, how many vehicles we sent, what kind of guards we had. Zixthara described how Rodriguez had turned the aliens' own thoroughness against them, how he had used their predictable schedules to plan perfect ambushes, how he had made their careful planning into a weakness. After 2 months of hunting him, we finally found one of his camps. It was hidden in a cave system that our maps said was empty. The old commander remembered that day clearly. We sent in 50 soldiers with full battle gear. We thought we finally had him trapped. She paused. Rodriguez had been gone for days, but he had left us a message. The young soldiers asked what kind of message. He had written words on the cave wall using some kind of chemical that glowed in the dark. The message was in our language. Perfect alien writing. Zixthara's voice got grim. The message said, "You are hunting the wrong enemy. I am not your problem. Your problem is that you invaded my species' territory. Every convoy you lose makes you weaker. Every day you stay here makes you more vulnerable. Go home while you still can." The crowd in the bar was completely silent. Everyone was imagining being hunted by such a creature. Below the message, Rodriguez had left detailed maps of all our bases on the planet, our secret locations, our hidden supply depots, our communication centers, everything. The commander explained how Rodriguez had somehow infiltrated every alien position on the planet, how he had gathered intelligence on their entire operation, how he had done it all without being detected. At the bottom of the cave, we found something even more terrifying. Rodriguez had been experimenting with alien technology. He had taken apart our weapons and vehicles. He had learned how they worked. Zixthara described how Rodriguez had built hybrid weapons using both human and alien technology, how he had created new types of explosives and chemical weapons, how he had turned captured alien equipment against its makers. We realized that Rodriguez was not just a soldier. He was an engineer, a chemist, a tactician. He was like a one-man army with the brain of a scientist. The recruits asked how they had finally caught him. We did not catch him. We cornered him. The commander explained how they had finally tracked Rodriguez to an abandoned mining complex, how they had surrounded the entire facility with 300 soldiers, how they had been certain he could not escape. We sent teams into the complex from all directions. We had him trapped in the central building. There was no way out. Zixthara's voice got heavy. Rodriguez triggered a series of explosions that brought down the entire complex. Tons of rock and metal collapsed on top of everything. Most of my soldiers barely escaped with their lives. The young soldiers asked if Rodriguez had died in the explosion. We thought so. We spent 2 days digging through the rubble looking for his body. We found pieces of alien equipment, we found some human gear, but we never found Rodriguez. The old commander took a long drink. 3 days later, another convoy disappeared. We found the same type of salt piles, the same chemical signatures. Rodriguez was still alive. She described how Rodriguez had somehow survived being buried under tons of debris, how he had escaped through underground tunnels that he had prepared in advance, how he had continued his one-man war without missing a beat. That was when our commanders realized the truth. Rodriguez was not just surviving our attempts to kill him, he was getting better at his job. Zixthara looked around the crowded bar. Each time we hunted him, he learned more about how we operated. Each time we found his camps, he improved his hiding techniques. We were not hunting him, we were training him. The recruits asked what happened in the end. Command pulled all our forces off that planet. We abandoned our bases. We left our equipment. We ran away from one human soldier. She stood up slowly. After the war ended, I read Rodriguez's military file. He had been a chemistry teacher before joining the human army. He taught children about science in a small school. The young soldiers looked shocked. A teacher had terrorized an entire alien army. Rodriguez went back to teaching after the war, but the human military also made him an instructor. He now teaches other human soldiers how to fight alone behind enemy lines. Zixthara looked at the frightened faces around her. That is what makes humans so dangerous. They can turn anyone into a weapon. Teachers, doctors, students, farmers. Give them training and motivation, and they become creatures like Rodriguez. She started to walk away, then turned back. Tomorrow I will tell you the final story, about why the war ended, about what humans can do when they stop holding back. The commander left the bar, leaving behind a room full of terrified aliens. They had learned that humans could fight wars with single soldiers who were more dangerous than entire alien armies. Outside the station, the stars seemed different now. Each point of light might hide a world full of humans like Rodriguez. Humans who could turn science into warfare. Humans who could make the impossible seem easy. The young recruits sat in silence, thinking about a chemistry teacher who had become Deathwalker. They were beginning to understand that the most frightening thing about humans was not their weapons or their ships. It was their ability to adapt, to learn, to become whatever the situation required them to become, and that made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. On the 5th night, the bar was packed beyond capacity. Aliens stood in the corridors outside, hoping to hear Commander Zixthara's final story. Station security had to manage the crowds. Everyone wanted to know how the war with humans had ended. The 3 young recruits had arrived hours early to keep their seats. They sat nervously as the old commander made her way through the crowd. Other aliens moved aside respectfully as she passed. "Tonight I tell you why we made peace with humans," Zixthara said as she sat down. "Tonight you will learn what happens when humans stop being gentle." A hush fell over the packed room. Even the aliens standing outside pressed closer to hear. After 4 years of war, our leaders thought they understood humans. They had seen Morrison's sacrifice. They had witnessed Blake's determination. They had experienced Clark's cunning and Rodriguez's terror campaigns. The commander looked around the room filled with expectant faces. Our high command believed they had forced humans to show their full strength. They were wrong. Terribly wrong. She ordered her final drink and began the last tale. The end came during peace negotiations on the neutral station Harmony Point. Our Fleet Admiral Kethmore met with the human fleet commander, Admiral Patricia Stone. Zixthara described Admiral Stone, a small woman with gray hair and calm blue eyes. She looked like someone's grandmother, not a military leader. The alien admirals had been disappointed. They expected someone more impressive, Admiral Kethmore was confident during the negotiations. He thought humans were exhausted from the war. He thought they were desperate for peace. He decided to demand harsh surrender terms. The old commander's voice grew serious. Kethmore told Admiral Stone that humans would have to give up half their colonies. They would have to pay tribute to the Velthrian Empire. They would have to limit their military to defensive forces only. The young recruits looked confused. What did Admiral Stone say? She listened quietly to all of Kethmore's demands. Then she asked one simple question. Are those your final terms? Zixthara explained how Kethmore had been pleased with Stone's calm reaction. He thought she was accepting defeat gracefully. He confirmed that those were his final terms. Admiral Stone nodded and made a request. She asked for a 12-hour recess to consider the terms. She said she needed to consult with human leadership. The commander took a sip of her drink. Kethmore agreed. He thought Stone needed time to convince her people to accept defeat. He was looking forward to victory celebrations. She paused. During that 12-hour break, Admiral Stone did something that changed everything. The crowd waited in complete silence. She ordered a single human ship to perform what she called a demonstration of unrestricted capability. The recruits asked what that meant. For 4 years, humans had been fighting, according to what they called rules of engagement. They had laws about how wars should be fought. They had restrictions on which weapons they could use. Zixthara's voice got quieter. Admiral Stone temporarily lifted those restrictions for one ship. She authorized them to fight without any limits. The old commander described how the human ship approached an uninhabited moon in a nearby system. A dead rock with no life and no value. The perfect target for a demonstration. The human ship fired a single weapon at the moon. Not a missile, not a bomb. Something we had never seen before. She looked around the terrified crowd. The weapon turned matter directly into energy. It converted the moon's own mass into pure power. The young soldiers gasped. They had studied physics. They knew what that meant. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. The moon did not just break apart. It stopped existing. Where there had been a solid celestial body, there was now only expanding energy and scattered atoms. Zixthara explained how the blast had been detected by sensors across half the galaxy. How the energy signature had been unlike anything any alien race had ever created. How it had made their most powerful weapons look like toys. Admiral Stone sent a message to Admiral Kethmore during the demonstration. She said, "This is what humans can do when we stop being polite. We have been fighting your people with approximately 30% of our actual military capability." The crowd in the bar was completely silent. Some aliens looked sick. Others seemed ready to faint. Stone explained that humans had rules about warfare. They believed in something called proportional response. They tried to use only enough force to achieve their objectives. The commander continued. But if aliens insisted on unconditional human surrender, Stone was prepared to authorize unrestricted warfare against all Velthrian targets. Zixthara described how Admiral Kethmore had watched the moon's destruction with growing horror, how he had realized that humans had been holding back during the entire war, how everything they had seen before was just humans being careful. Stone gave Kethmore a choice. He could accept new peace terms that treated both species as equals, or he could face human warfare without any restrictions. The young recruits asked what the new terms were. Both sides would keep their existing territories. Both sides would establish trade agreements. Both sides would share certain technologies for mutual benefit. No tribute, no surrender, just peace between equals. The old commander took a long drink. Admiral Kethmore accepted immediately. He sent a message to the Velthrian High Command recommending complete acceptance of human terms. She explained how the peace treaty had been signed within hours, how both fleets had stood down immediately, how the war had ended not with human defeat, but with alien recognition of human power. After the treaty was signed, I had a chance to speak privately with Admiral Stone. I asked her about the humans I had encountered during the war. Zixthara's voice became thoughtful. I asked about Morrison. Stone told me he received humanity's highest military honor. They built a monument to him and his crew. Human children learn about their sacrifice in school. The recruits listened as she continued. Blake was promoted to general after his death. They named 3 military academies after him. Stone said, "Every human officer studies his defense of Procyon Station." The commander described what had happened to the other humans from her stories. Clark became a training instructor. She teaches human soldiers how to resist interrogation and gather intelligence while captured. She paused. Rodriguez went back to teaching chemistry, but he also works with human special forces. He trains them in unconventional warfare techniques. One of the young soldiers asked why humans had held back during the war. Admiral Stone explained something called the human concept of proportional response. She said humans believe that using excessive force against any enemy is morally wrong. Zixthara looked around the room. "Stone told me that humans have rules about warfare because they know what they are capable of when those rules are removed. They have seen what happens when they fight without restrictions." The commander's voice got serious. Stone said that humans had fought wars against themselves for thousands of years. They had learned that unlimited warfare leads to the destruction of civilizations. She explained how humans had developed weapons capable of destroying entire planets during their own civil conflicts, how they had created rules and treaties to prevent such weapons from being used again. The demonstration on the moon was just a small example of human capabilities. Stone told me that humans possess weapons that could sterilize entire star systems. The young recruits looked terrified. "Why did she tell you this?" "Because she wanted me to understand something important. Humans do not fight wars because they enjoy violence. They fight wars to protect their people and to establish peace." Zixthara stood up slowly for the last time. Stone said that humans prefer to make friends rather than enemies. They want to trade and learn and grow together with other species. She looked at the frightened faces around her. "But if anyone threatens human colonies or human families, they will face creatures like Morrison and Blake and Clark and Rodriguez. And those humans will not be fighting with restrictions." The old commander prepared to leave. "The peace treaty has lasted 15 years. Humans and Velthrians now work together on many projects. Human teachers work on our worlds. Our scientists study on human planets." She paused at the edge of the crowd. "The humans I fought against during the war are now our allies. Morrison's nephew commands a joint human-alien exploration vessel. Blake's daughter is married to a Velthrian diplomat." Zixthara looked back one final time. "Remember this lesson above all others. Humans are not our enemies because we chose not to be theirs. They gave us a choice between friendship and annihilation. We chose wisely." The commander walked away, leaving behind a room full of aliens who finally understood the truth about humans. They were not just another species to fight or conquer. They were the most dangerous and most generous creatures in the galaxy. Outside the station, the stars looked different now. They no longer seemed threatening. They seemed full of possibilities, full of worlds where humans and aliens could work together instead of fighting. The young recruits sat quietly, thinking about everything they had learned. They understood now why their people had made peace. They understood why that peace had lasted. And they understood that the greatest strength of humanity was not their weapons or their warriors. It was their ability to choose mercy when they had the power to choose destruction.